NBC Sports presents the season premiere of the United States Football League.
Upstart 49ers. They're 6 yards away from Pontiac. 3rd and 3. Montana looking, throwing in the end zone. Dwight Clark.
Rice has just set a Super Bowl record with 12 catches. He's in motion. Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Hey, baby! We're going to be here all day, baby! I like this kind of party! I like this kind of party, baby! This is when the big dogs come out. Okay, all right. You can't roll with the big dogs. Stay on the board.
His method is not Grand Prix, but Demolition Derby.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. Basically a football show, episode 16.
The Joe Montana edition.
The Joe Montana? The Tennessee Peyton Manning?
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Who else? Well, okay. I guess we're going to go with Joe Montana and Peyton Manning.
Joe Montana, I think, is a good enough place to go with the number 16 all by itself. If
anyone can come up with a better number 16 in the NFL, feel free to send it to us.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. Episode 16 of basically a football show. You just heard Greg. I'm Zach. And NFL had a good comeback from a couple boring weeks there. A lot of weather involved. But still made out for a pretty exciting Sunday. But again, we're going to push the NFL to the second segment because most important weekend on the college football schedule. Last weekend was probably the best weekend on the college football schedule every week or every year. But conference championship weekend solidifying the BCS and giving us a little surprises here and there with what happened on Saturday and Friday for that matter.
Yeah, and Friday too. It's like I said before we started recording, not exactly where I wanted to be coming into this show, but here we are.
Yeah, me neither, but we'll get to both of our miseries sooner. Yours sooner than mine, thankfully. But we'll start with the number 1 Florida State Seminoles taking on the number 20 Duke Blue Devils in the ACC title game. And, all Florida State had to do was basically show up and they were going to win this one. But Duke played tough early.
Yes, they did.
They played really hard. They ended up getting blown out 45-7. But in the first half, and especially that first quarter, Duke came to play, and they gave Florida State all they could handle early on. And, it's a very respectable showing. They didn't win, but I have a lot of respect for the way Duke played on Saturday.
I thought our Blue Devils really represented themselves well. And like you said, if all Florida State had to do was show up and not fall down, and they were going to win that game. But and the Blue Devils, just a great season. They finish up 10-3?
10-3 on the regular season, yeah.
So, but I don't think that game surprised anyone the way it turned out. But, yeah, the Blue Devils played real tough in the first half. But even the most diehard Duke fan, I had to realized during that part of the game that it was just a matter of time before Florida State kicked it into high gear and ran off, and that's pretty much what happened.
Interesting thing that both teams decided to go color-on-color jerseys, which was pretty amazing to look at. The light royal blue of Duke going up against the burgundy of Seminoles.
Yeah, and Duke didn't show up and wear any of that silly black stuff that they wear.
Nope.
They wore their normal uniforms, and I thought it looked fantastic.
Yep, I was actually very impressed with all of the participants in Conference Championship Saturday. No one came out looking really like a clown show. Michigan State could have done without the green pants. But,
yeah.
Anyway, for Duke's efforts this season, they get a bid to the Chick-fil-A Bowl on New Year's Eve to play Texas A&M in Atlanta. So, Duke's going to be – they're finishing up the season ranked number 24 here. A&M's 21, but I have no doubts that A&M will probably take that game when that one gets played later on.
Yeah, I got to say that one is probably going to go a lot like the Florida State game did for the Blue Devils.
Yeah.
But the Chick-fil-A Bowl is a pretty good bowl bid for a program like Duke. It's
right.
Not a bad bowl to get at all.
Right, exactly. And, I mean, they're punching above their weight class playing against an SEC team, but, it's still everything coming up great for Duke. But coming up roses for Florida State. They win, obviously, and they solidify the number 1 spot. They will be in the BCS title game. And, we all kind of expected that, but all week we'd been talking about the 2-3, what was going to happen, whether even if both teams won, was Auburn going to end up jumping over Ohio State, or, were either of these teams going to win their conference championship games? And gave you a little curveball there, Greg. Michigan State, Ohio State in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game. Michigan State went up 17-0 at one point.
Yeah,
and the Buckeyes were able to storm back there a little bit and get a lead there for a minute, but not too long. As Michigan State 14 points in the fourth quarter, very physical game, great defensive game, good running game from Michigan State, and just more. They were able to pass a lot better than I think that I've seen them play all season. Easily their best performance of the year, and a 34-24 beating of your Ohio State Buckeyes. And Michigan State is going to go on to the Rose Bowl, and Ohio State does not go to the BCS title game. They will fall down to the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, I will give Michigan State credit. They took the Buckeyes just laid out their best punch on Michigan State, and the Spartans didn't flinch. Because the Buckeyes came back, took the lead. I think they scored, 24 unanswered points?
Yep.
And Michigan State, a lot of teams would have just folded up the tents at that point. But Michigan State hung tough, and they came back. And what kind of irks me a little bit about this is that there were so many people saying, well, Ohio State was exposed for the frauds that they were. They may very well be frauds, but I don't think it's fair to Michigan State to say that it was just the Buckeyes weren't as good as people thought they were. Michigan State played a great football game, and that defense of theirs is the real deal.
No, definitely. I think if this was next season, I'd almost give Michigan State a shot at being in the playoff.
Absolutely.
And right now, with the final BCS standings after everything shook out, Michigan State ends up in the number 4 spot, jumping over a few teams that I didn't think they would. Just Ohio State was number 2, so that obviously helped them in the computers a lot to jump them up that high. But Michigan State number 4 in the BCS going into the bowl season, and just an overall impressive victory. I don't think I've seen that was probably the most impressive victory that I've seen, despite nobody really knowing what the Big Ten is, if this is just Big Ten of Big Ten violence. But from my own eye test, what Michigan State showed me was just as good as anybody else has shown me all season.
Well, that's my thing, and I get that the Big Ten has this reputation. And I blame a lot of that reputation on my Ohio State Buckeyes. I think that they're still paying the price for losing those back-to-back national championship games in 06 and 07. But and if you've listened to the show throughout the season, you've known that I have not been sold on this Buckeyes team. I've never thought they were as good as they were ranked. But I'm also kind of tired of the whole they're a bunch of imposters, too. They're a good football team. They're right probably where they should be in the rankings now, like 7. I would say that they're a definite top 15 team. I don't think they were a top 5 team all season long. But Michigan State, what I saw, that defense, I think they could hang with anybody. Maybe not in Alabama, maybe not one of the really top elite upper echelon teams, but short of that, I think they're really good. I don't think it's a Big Ten. I don't think that we looked at that game and saw 2 Big Ten teams that looked better that wouldn't be as good against other competition. I think that Michigan State is a very, very good football team.
Yeah, but if Michigan State doesn't drop that early one to Notre Dame early on in the year, a game, looking back on it, they really wish they had that one back. They would be in the title game most likely playing against Florida State. So.
Absolutely. We talked about that last week. How huge would this game have been if Michigan State had come into it undefeated too? But
yep, both teams were 11-0 going into that. That would have been a showdown. But it was anyway. Michigan State comes out on top. Just a great performance. They will head to the Rose Bowl. Ohio State will get Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Clemson getting picked from way down low, but replacing the SEC or the ACC team there with Florida State leaving the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, I can't win for losing this year because now no matter what happens, let's say that I think the Buckeyes are better than Clemson.
Yeah, probably.
So if they beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl, well, it was just Clemson. If they go to Alabama, I still think is one of the top 3 teams in the country, maybe the very best team in the country when it's all said and done. And they lose to Alabama in the Orange Bowl, well, it's Ohio State just being Ohio State. If they go to the national championship game and Florida State smokes them, so there's no way to come out of this looking good for the Buckeyes. There's just no way.
Yeah, and And so with Ohio State losing, going to fall out there at the number 2 spot. Earlier in the day, the SEC winner was the one that gets to pull in there. They were the ones partying down on the streets once Ohio State went down. And what a SEC championship game that was. 2 teams you didn't think they were just probably going to duke it out. It was going to be a physical, low-scoring game. Ended up being quite the shootout.
Yeah.
Auburn and Missouri combined for 101 total points in the SEC title game. Both teams scored in double digits every single quarter, except Missouri. Missouri did not score any points in the fourth quarter as Auburn pulled away to win 59-42, and the Auburn Tigers giving the SEC one more shot to win another BCS title, going on to the BCS title game with this win in the SEC championship game.
What a turnaround for the Tigers this year.
Yeah, right?
To get up off the floor from where they were at last year. Now they're in the national championship game. That game surprised me. I expected a lot of different things, a 59-42 or whatever the final was. That was not any of the things I expected coming into that game.
No,
that was insane.
Auburn's running attack was impressive.
Yeah.
But so was Missouri's. And this is my question now. As we go on to the BCS title game, both teams, Florida State and Auburn, have impressive offenses when they're clicking. I think Florida State's defense is a little bit better than Auburn's, and especially if Auburn's defense plays like they did against Missouri, I don't think Auburn could beat Florida State in a shootout.
No. I don't think Auburn can beat Florida State, period. I think Florida State's now again, this is all just eye test stuff, and looking at Florida State's schedule, when you start going back now after the season's over, who did they really play? I mean,
Clemson and Miami were the 2 big wins they had all year.
Yeah, and
Miami fell off, and Clemson was able to climb themselves back up into the top rankings, but even then, just not. But that's the other thing. Florida State, despite not playing anybody of any sort of merit, they still averaged a margin of victory of like 45 points over the entire season.
Exactly.
In a power conference. So, no matter how good or bad the ACC was on the whole this year, I still think it's better than, say, the MAC or the Mountain West.
Oh, sure.
From top to bottom. And so I think 45 points as a margin of victory for an entire season, that's the biggest in the BCS era.
Well,
for a team that went undefeated. So.
That would be my argument for Florida State. Just wiping the floor or wiping the field, excuse me. Let me get my metaphors right here.
Right, use that Ohio State education.
Exactly, I got to get my Ohio State education in there. But I just, looking at Florida State and what I've seen all season, I like Auburn. I really do. I've always liked them. But when it comes into this game, this is going to be ugly. I think the SEC's reign at the top of college football is going to end, and it's going to end badly for the Auburn Tigers. I just don't think they can hang with Florida State. I think the only team in the country that could have is now going to the Sugar Bowl, and that would be Alabama. I think Florida State's just going to walk with this because you're right. Both offenses are very high-powered, but Florida State's got a defense that I believe is just better than Auburn's.
Did you see the late hit out of bounds in that SEC game?
No.
Where the guy got hit into the golf cart?
I heard it. I didn't see it. I was actually out of the room when it happened.
One of the Missouri Tiger running back was running down the sideline, and the Auburn guy just grabbed him, and they were well out of bounds. He just kind of shoved him to the ground, and he slid along and took the corner of a golf cart in the square of his back.
Ooh.
And that wasn't pretty, but
Was he okay?
Yeah, he ended up being okay. He got bandaged up on the sideline, but it could have been a lot worse. But it just one interesting hit there that happened in the game. But Auburn has some interesting angles that they can run from. Their quarterback is a dual threat. But and here's the other thing, though. You have an entire month to prepare.
Right.
So does that, for a team that is, I guess, as explosive as Florida State is on offense, do you think that a month off is going to hurt them, or is the month going to be just strict planning sort of things?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. A month off, on the upside, it gets everybody healthy.
Right.
But the downside, and we've seen this a lot over the years with the national championship game, even with the January 1st bowls, teams get rusty after being off the field for a month, and that's always been one of the big arguments. Well, the national championship game is a week later than the normal January 1 bowl games are, so it could go either way. And that, to me, is what's going to make it interesting, because after 4 weeks, that gives Auburn a lot of time to prepare for Florida State. They're going to be able to watch all the film they need, do all the preparation, but by the same token, it gives Florida State all the same time. So that's the upside. The downside is, you're right, it might hurt both of them being out for that long. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, we still got plenty of time before that happens, so we'll stick that one on the back burner because even to the regular bowl games, we still have 12 days before the regular bowl game starts. So
even the very first one, right?
Right.
It's
the first
away.
bowl games are on the 21st.
Right.
So still got some time there.
Real quick, before we move on, are you there are too many bowls person, or are you like me and I'm just thrilled that there are that many bowls because there's always a good game to watch? Not necessarily a good game, but a game.
Yeah, I mean, I like the amount of bowls. Sometimes they can get a little bit too weighed down for my taste.
Yeah.
Like, we'll look at some of these later because I wanted to ask you what your opinion on some of these bowls.
Okay.
The ones you're going to look forward to and the ones that are just probably going to be background noise. Because I'm skimming them over again right now, and there are a few that I'm just going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to have that game on just to say that it was on.
Because when I looked at that,
for the purpose of the show, but
when I looked at the list, I had trouble coming up with matchups that I went, wow, I really want to see that.
Yeah, there are a few duds, but that's the way bowl season works. When all you have to be is 6-6 to qualify, and even then there were still like 4 6-6 teams that were left out of it. And I think I read we're getting 3 more bowls next season.
That might be where I think we're right at the tipping point right now. A lot of people would say there are too many. Any more than this, that's going to be too many. If anything, get rid of a couple, but no more than what we have right now.
Well, because we don't even know what they're going to do. Well, I guess to an extent we kind of do with the playoff and how that's going to rotate through the bowls. So it's going to be kind of weird the way the bowls are going to be set up. And I mean, they've got one playing in Marlins Park next year in Miami. They're having one in the Bahamas. And I think it's not like a marquee thing. It's like the MAC versus Conference USA or something like that.
Hey, but think about it. You're a MAC school or a Conference USA school. You may not play for the national championship, but you're going to get a trip to the Bahamas maybe. That's not bad.
Yeah, well, that's assuming all your team gets passports made up in time.
I didn't think of it like that.
Our friend DeFwabble pointed that out as to be buzzkill.
He's always on top of the things that, A, no one's interested in, and B, take the fun right out of everything.
Yeah. Let's move on to the rest of these championship games real quick. The right to play Michigan State in the Rose Bowl was between my Sun Devils and Stanford, and we talked about it. I was pretty confident going into this one. Game was being played in Tempe. Arizona State had been playing really well up until this point. They'd gotten better and better as the season went along. Stanford kind of stumbled, and right out of the gates, it was no different than the last time. Stanford put an exclamation point on this thing pretty early. I think like a 60 or 70 yard run on their second play from scrimmage, and ASU was it was 14-0. ASU scored a touchdown. I thought maybe they're going to be getting back into this thing, but Stanford just kept marching and marching. ASU couldn't mount any sort of pass rush against that offensive line of Stanford, which are just the whole thing is made out of a big slab of meat.
Right,
it's just a meat wall, and all those guys are going to go to the NFL. Those are guys that you want on your team if you're looking for a lineman to draft. Look at Stanford, but they ran it home again. Big physical win. Stanford demolishes ASU in Sun Devil Stadium, 38-14. Kind of demoralizing to watch confetti and fireworks go off as the visiting team wins in your stadium, but so it is.
When did you give up hope? When did you realize that it probably wasn't going to happen in that game?
Let's see. What was the halftime score? Halftime was 28-14. At half, I was still, we're only down 2 touchdowns, right? It's right there. And they held Stanford to just a field goal and a touchdown in the second half. But I think it was probably somewhere in the second quarter, like realistically, because ASU just wasn't generating any sort of pass rush. It was hard to get any consistent. Like when they started getting stops on Stanford, they forced 3 or 4 consecutive 3-and-outs from Stanford, and ASU just could not get anything going because they were down to their third string running back. Their first 2 running backs were injured, and so they have the third string guy in there. He's not used to running this offense daily. I mean, he gets the reps, but not the same as Marion Gricewood or even DJ Foster was. And there was just no rhythm, and it was pretty much doomed from the start, though.
I will say this: we have got a really great track record on this show of burying a team only to have them come back and prove us completely wrong. And the Stanford Cardinal did that. We had kind of written them off. They didn't have anything to play for, blah, blah, blah. They showed us that they're still a really, really good football team, and I would probably looking at the BCS rankings right now, I would put Stanford ahead of Michigan State. I think they're a better football team. I think I think they're better than Auburn. I think that if you wanted to look at it from a pure who are the best teams standpoint right now, the three teams you got to be talking about for the national championship are Stanford, Alabama, and Florida State.
Yeah, looking back on it, I think Stanford would have been okay had they only lost to USC.
Right.
That Utah loss is killing them right now.
Yep.
I mean, maybe the SEC still gets the bias and they get to stay up in that number 2 spot no matter what. But I think if it was between 12-1 Stanford or 12-1 Michigan State and 12-1 Auburn, that would be a hell of a discussion. And I think Stanford would be just as legitimate as either of those other two to have a claim to a national championship spot.
Yeah, I agree. And just on the Sun Devils, I was disappointed. Obviously, I couldn't devote my full attention to it because the Buckeyes are playing at roughly the same time.
Right. That was the one thing that sucked. Was there was like 3 or 4. There was the ACC game, the Pac-12 game, and the Big Ten game, all playing at the same time. It was kind of hard to keep track of everything.
I had it on my little TV, and I'd keep looking over, and I'd see the score and I just thought this is bad. But oh well. They still had a great season. I don't think anyone expected Arizona State to be what are they? Would they finish 10-2, 10-3?
10-3, 10-3 in the regular season.
That's a great season for them. I didn't expect that out of them coming into it.
No, I mean I thought they had a chance to win the South, and they ended up winning it. Ended up hosting the Pac-12 title game, 10-win season. Overall, a great year. And the guys on this team, none of these guys are going to be leaving. There's some, guys like Will Sutton, who's going to be a very good NFL player. They're going to leave, but there's a lot of guys coming back next year to only make this team improve. Because I think this is a step forward. Get another summer, another spring and another summer under their belt under Todd Graham, who's done wonders since coming to Tempe. Changed the culture and changed the goals and the mindset of this team. I think they're going to be great next year. And ASU gets a trip to the Holiday Bowl for their wares down here in San Diego. We'll be playing Texas Tech. I think I'm going to go to that game.
Oh, you absolutely should.
If I can't afford the ticket, because for whatever reason, Holiday Bowl tickets are actually pretty expensive. Hopefully ASU still has a little bit of their allotment left, because the school tickets are a little bit cheaper than the outside tickets. But I will at least be down there to tailgate at the very least, because if there's nothing else, if ASU, they can lose every game of the season, they will win every single tailgate you take them to. I will guarantee that. And Stanford goes on to the Rose Bowl to play Michigan State, the 100th Rose Bowl, and I couldn't think of a better matchup. Two big physical teams,
right.
Very good on defense, very good at running the ball. This is the kind of game that the Rose Bowl loves. A good Pac-12, Big Ten matchup of two big physical, strong teams in the 100th edition of the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one, and I guess for next year, you like the way the Sun Devils are shaping up. Next year, we'll finally get to see Urban Meyer's first recruiting class start to come into its own. Mm-hmm. So here's hoping for an Ohio State-Arizona State final in the playoff next year.
In the playoff, sure. I'd be down for it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah. Well, because considering Jameis Winston's still going to come back next year.
Yeah, but we'll worry about all that this time next year. But it's going to be a great Rose Bowl. But let's move on. Moving on
to the Big 12, and interesting scenario for the Big 12. At first, there's only one game that really matters. And that first game, the early game, was Oklahoma State, the Bedlam game. And it lived up to its name. If Oklahoma State wins this game, they win the Big 12. And Texas Baylor later in the day means absolutely nothing. But this game, like I said, lived up to the rivalry's name, the Bedlam game. It was nuts. Back and forth all day. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma, I should say. 16 points there in the fourth quarter to come back and win in Stillwater, 33-24, and knock Oklahoma State out of the Big 12 lead and out of the BCS lead, or the BCS spot, because with their second conference loss, no matter what, it was going to be the winner of Texas and Baylor later in the day. But Oklahoma State out, and Oklahoma with their win, they earn a spot in the Sugar Bowl where they will take on Alabama, a good traditional power matchup there.
It's a classic matchup, isn't it?
Classic matchup that's going to end up being a blowout. But
yeah. This was a tough one for Oklahoma State. It knocked them out of everything, because there was a possibility they would have been in the national championship discussion had they won this game. They knocked themselves out of a BCS Bowl. That was one they had to have, and they couldn't get it. And to lose it at home, even worse.
Yeah, I'm trying to find What bowl did they end up going to?
I don't know. No idea.
Here we go. Yeah, okay. The loser of this game, the first de facto Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma State, they get to go to the Cotton Bowl to take on the loser of the SEC championship game, Missouri, in an old Big 12 matchup in the Cotton Bowl, which it's really weird seeing those two teams play against each other, considering how long they were both in the Big 12 together.
Right.
But that'll be an interesting game there on January 3rd, for whatever reason.
I've always wondered why the Cotton Bowl never seemed to make the cut with the BCS Bowls, because when I was young, that was one of the bowl games, January 1 bowl games. But
starting next year in the playoff, it is in the rotation for those playoff games now. I think that the Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, they're all in that rotation for playoff sites. And of course they can always bid, because the national championship game they can bid for by themselves. But Cotton Bowl is going to make a little bit of a comeback starting next year.
Well, it'll be an interesting matchup. I'm not that excited about it though, because like you said, it's just an old Big 12 matchup. I would have rather seen them play someone that they're not familiar with, but it'll still be a pretty good game. There
was some talk that with the Cotton Bowl and with Jerry Jones in the helm of it, they were going to try and jerry-rig it so that Texas would play Texas A&M one more time in the Cotton Bowl, which I would have loved, because I'm sad that game doesn't get played anymore. But Texas had a big game of their own to play on Saturday. As after Oklahoma State lost, the winner of Texas-Baylor was going to be the Big 12 champ. They were going to go to the BCS, and in I think it was 4 or 6 degree temperatures there in Waco, the Baylor Bears, with a huge second-half explosion. Both teams started off really slow. This was almost exactly like the Oklahoma game for Baylor early in the year, when it was kind of slow. I think that game was 5-2 at half,
right?
6-2 at half, and now this one was tied 3-3 at half. Baylor 17 points in the third quarter, just explodes there in the second half. An interesting little series where there was an interception, looked like it was returned for a pick six to ice the game there late in the game, and it got called back because of the stupid taunting, unsportsmanlike rule, because I guess the runner broke his stride, whatever the hell that means.
Oh, God.
And, but Baylor scored on the very next play, no big deal, and they ran right over Texas 30-10. And Baylor is the Big 12 champions, and Baylor will be going to the Fiesta Bowl.
To take on
the American Athletic Conference champion, UCF, who, with, I guess, Louisville, they beat Cincinnati the other day, so they clinched it then, but UCF played SMU in Dallas and won a tight, very cold game. SMU, the game was so cold outside in Dallas that normally I think it's like $10 for tickets. SMU said it's free if you want to show up and sit on aluminum bleachers.
Really?
In 4 degrees and like negative wind chill. Yeah.
It got that cold in Texas. That's wild.
Yeah. It was a scene. There was some snow around the outside, but it was really icy and chilly. No, but neither team really seemed all that interested in playing the football game. But UCF won, so they won the American Conference. They're the last at-large selection because nobody wanted UCF.
Right.
And they get to play Baylor there in the Fiesta Bowl,
which will be the Fiesta Bowl just wasn't going to get a good matchup no matter what happened this year.
Right.
Because of UCF. And I don't get me wrong, UCF fans, if there are any of you out there, I love your football team. I love that they're going to a BCS Bowl, but they're going to get smoked. I don't see anyone that's in the BCS Bowls that UCF could beat.
Nope.
Not one.
No, and I mean, the Fiesta Bowl was either going to get UCF or if the MAC champion, or the MAC loser as it is now, had won their game, they would have made it in there, and that wouldn't have been any better. But that was the first upset of the weekend. We thought you should have seen it from there that this weekend was going to get a little crazy. Friday night, Bowling Green just demolished Northern Illinois 47-27 in the MAC title game. Northern Illinois lost the game out of the – they don't win the MAC. They don't go undefeated. They don't stay ahead of UCF. And so they don't get to go to the BCS Bowl, and they are no longer the Buster. And, thankfully for us, because we didn't want to see them get rolled over again, especially if they're going to lose to Bowling Green. But
Bowling Green's a pretty good team.
Disappointing, though, for them.
Well, if you watched any of that game, it was never even as close as the score would lead you to believe. Bowling Green dominated that game.
No.
It was never that close. And this is what I found funny about it. Everybody's talking about how much money that Northern Illinois cost themselves by losing. Bowling Green cost themselves a good chunk of change by winning that game.
Yeah, I think each team in the MAC was going to get $800,000.
Right.
Northern Illinois made the bowl.
Yeah, so
I think it was like $8 million total, if or something like that.
But yeah, so Bowling Green winning that game not only cost Northern Illinois a bunch of money, they cost themselves, Toledo, Western Michigan, everybody a bunch of money.
Yeah, that's the weird part about the BCS. But you're not going to tell the kids on the field. They could care less about what money the conference is going to get.
Exactly.
So Bowling Green wins. Bowling Green, they get to go. They won the MAC title game in Detroit, and your reward for winning the MAC title game in Detroit is the Little Caesars Bowl in Detroit.
Right.
So enjoy your game against Pittsburgh, Bowling Green.
That bowl game is one that I've been wanting to go to for years, and every year something comes up where I end up not getting to go to it. So this year I thought, I'm going to go this year. Then I looked for tickets. Yeah. $68 is the cheapest ticket. I thought, I am not paying $68 to watch Bowling Green play Pitt. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, the cheapest, when I was talking about the Holiday Bowl, the cheapest ticket for the Holiday Bowl, if I was going to buy it without going through the school, is $80 to sit in the upper end zone.
Right.
For ASU versus Texas Tech in what's probably going to be a half-empty stadium as it is.
That's my thing. This is the Little Caesars Bowl. You're going to be lucky if you get 20,000 people inside of Ford Field for that game. Where you get off charging $68 a pop and that's the cheap tickets. I think they were between $68 and $125.
Yeah.
No one's going to pay that much money. No one that doesn't have only the most hardcore Bowling Green and Pitt fans are going to go to that game, and that's going to be it. And to me, I don't understand why you've got a pretty big population base to draw from in the Detroit area. You got Toledo and the whole thing. Make the tickets $20. You never know. People like me, there might be more of me out there that would just show up just to say they've been to a bowl game. But no.
Right. And, I mean, thankfully enough for them, Pittsburgh and Bowling Green are relatively close.
Right.
And I'm sure the alumni bases are kind of spread out through there, so they might be able to pull people from there. But, but then you look at, like, the San Diego, the Holiday Bowl. ASU they're close, but Texas Tech is not close.
No.
I don't think there's a lot of Texas Tech alumni in Southern California. And even the other bowl in San Diego, the Poinsettia Bowl, where Northern Illinois goes down to, they're playing Utah State in San Diego.
Yeah.
So the way they pick some of these bowls and where they schedule them, and it's weird to me sometimes. But
that's the thing. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to have teams that don't draw that well, don't charge ridiculous ticket prices on top of it, and then turn around and complain because no one goes to your game. That's what gets me. It's like, well, the attendance isn't that great. So we whine and complain about it. Well, again, I'm just $68 to watch Pitt and Bowling Green play is absolutely. If I could stand on the sidelines, maybe, but that's about it.
And the thing with these bowls too, a lot of the schools, if they don't sell their allotments for the tickets, they're on the hook for these things.
Exactly.
And so a lot of these schools, especially in the tinier bowls, like the Little Caesars Bowl, they get on the hook for these things, and they end up losing money for going to these games. So I don't know. But let's do a quick roundup here of the BCS games. Again, national title game, Florida State, Auburn. But that's going to be on January 6th. The January 1st games, you have the Rose Bowl earlier in the day, Stanford, Michigan State. Fiesta Bowl at night, UCF and Baylor. January 2nd, you have the Sugar Bowl, Alabama and Oklahoma. Good traditional matchup. They skipped over a couple teams to get Oklahoma, but it was never going to be not Oklahoma in that game. Even if Oklahoma State ended up higher than Oklahoma has the cachet.
Yeah, I'm looking at the rankings. I don't know who they would have picked other than Oklahoma for that game.
Right, and then the Orange Bowl, your Ohio State Buckeyes and the Clemson Tigers.
A little bit of trivia. The first time these two have played each other since Woody Hayes punched a player for Clemson back in 1979.
Oh, man. That's great, and I'm glad that I heard about it now because I don't know what they're going to show me in the pregame or during that game all the time. I can't believe I'm not going to see that more than one time.
Well, I thought I'd bring it up just because I'm pretty sure that no one else will. So I wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Yeah. Let's run through some of these other bowls real quick.
Okay.
And some of these things, like we said, we like some of the smaller bowls, but okay. Washington State, Colorado State in the Gildan, New Mexico Bowl. That's the first bowl on the bowl schedule. That will be the one that kicks off Capital One Bowl week, quote unquote. The thing that stretches out into 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's really never a week long, is it?
No, it never was. I don't know why they ever called it that. But yeah, I don't know so much about that one, or Buffalo, San Diego State, or where's the one that really? Oh, it's there's Marshall in Maryland.
How about Tulane, LA Lafayette, or Louisiana Lafayette?
Yeah, the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. Isn't that one in the Superdome?
I think it is. Yeah,
and that's where Tulane plays, and that game is never filled.
No.
Even when Tulane's playing there normally.
No, because Tulane doesn't. They're not a power team. I'm sure they've got a decent fan base, but not enough to fill that place.
Yep. Let's see. Middle Tennessee takes on Navy.
Well, see, I always like watching Navy because I love that crazy triple option that they run, but
yeah,
I'm rare in that respect.
There's a couple of bad ones, and here's the ones that always get me. It used to be an interesting stat when they would say, he's gotten the team to 6 January bowl games, which normally meant the BCS,
right,
or one of those other second tier bowls, but are still good, like the Gator Bowl, the Capital One Bowl, Outback Bowl,
right.
But now you have the Heart of Dallas Bowl on January 1st, UNLV in North Texas. You have, where is that? The BBVA Compass Bowl on January 4th, which is after the Orange Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl, Vanderbilt and Houston. And the second to last bowl, the one the day before the national championship game, something that should be, I don't know, important or at least, worth watching, Arkansas State and Ball State in the GoDaddy Bowl in Mobile, Alabama.
Yep.
Why? If you're the coach of Arkansas State, you could say, I got my team to a January bowl game.
Uh-huh.
But that doesn't mean anything. That's not – you didn't get to the Cotton Bowl. You didn't get to the Rose Bowl.
See, I like all the stuff about the Capital One Bowl month except that. I don't like any games that aren't BCS games being played after January 1st.
Right.
It's just tradition, and a sport that's supposedly so tradition-laden as college football is, why are we throwing a matchup that no one cares about in a bowl game that no one's going to go to on the night before the national championship game? And the January, so now you can say we've been to a January bowl. Well, sure. But I guarantee you that if you ask 10 people on the street, none of them could name it.
Yeah. Well, let's forget about the bad bowls. And these are, we're still going to have the bad bowl games on TV. Just because it's football. And during the week, we don't watch basketball. There's not going to be too much. The NFL is only on Sundays, but I think the first one that I'm looking here on the schedule that I'm fairly interested in is Fresno State versus USC. Fresno State in the Royal Purple Las Vegas Bowl. This one, Fresno State gets a chance at a power conference team to see what they're really made of. They had the one loss to San Jose State, which was bad, and USC they're going to be playing without a normal head coach, as Ed Orgeron left, and Steve Sarkisian, the head coach now at SC, which I think is a great hire for SC, stealing away from Washington. But I think the coach is going to be the offensive coordinator. So maybe USC's not really up for the game, but I think this is a good stage for Fresno. And it's going to be on national TV on ABC, not just cable. It's going to be on network TV.
Oh, okay.
Fresno. Yeah.
That'll be interesting. This is Fresno State's chance to kind of make an impression.
Yep. And the thing – I don't know how the non-conference schools or non-automatic qualifiers are going to work next year, but if they can put together an impressive performance here, that might get them a little bit higher placing on the preseason rankings next year, and that could get them up in the talk for not making the playoff. I don't think any non-automatic qualifiers are ever going to make the playoff unless you have something extreme like we had with Boise State a few years ago. But, they might be able to work themselves up to a more respectable position than the Royal Purple Las Vegas Bowl on the very first day of the bowl games.
Is it sponsored by a color, or is there a company that has something to do with that?
I would hope that it's a company.
Okay.
I would hope that the color purple is not sponsored.
It's the Sesame Street Bowl, brought to you by the letter B.
Right. Sheridan Hawaii Bowl, Boise State and Oregon State, another good
that'll be a shootout.
Mountain West Pac-12 matchup. Boise State, this is going to be their first game without coach Chris Peterson. And, last week we even talked about it. We're like, oh, yeah, he's got a good gig there. He'll never leave. He's turned down so many other good jobs.
Right.
I don't understand why he turns down jobs like, Texas and USC and UCLA. But of all the teams, he chooses to go to Washington, leaving Boise State.
You want
in
to
the
know?
dust.
You want to know why he turns down the USC's and because there's not as much pressure.
Yeah.
If he goes to Washington and makes them relevant in the Pac-12 again, then he's going to look like a genius. If he goes to USC and goes 7-5, then he just looks like a bad coach. That's why I think that he doesn't take the bigger jobs. I'm surprised, though. Like you said, we just talked about it last week. We're like, it's really cool. Chris Peterson stays and this and that, and next day he's gone.
Yeah, and any Boise State fans out there, and I know there's a few of you, get ready for the fall because I think this team's about to go right back down to the dumps.
Yep.
Chris Peterson made that team a lot of what it was, and maybe they could get somebody to come in and do well for them again. I think I read where Dirk Cutter is getting another shot there to be interviewed. But
yeah, that's the thing. He built them up over a course of a few years. They got a reputation, and then you had guys that weren't quite – that were probably good players, but weren't going to get recruited by the USCs and the bigger schools. That went to Boise State. He was able to put together a good program. They get a reputation, and that's how they got to where they are. Forget it now. Now they got to do it all over again.
Yep. Let's see. Moving on down the schedule, BYU Washington in the Fight Hunger Bowl, another game in a football or a baseball stadium, which is always fun.
That's when they're on both sides, the same side of the field, right?
Yeah, that's the other weird thing is they put them both on the same side of the field instead of opposite sidelines. When I watched that game 2 years ago, or was it last year? Last year when ASU played in it. There's room for both teams on either sideline. I don't know why they do that. But
I don't either. I have never understood that.
Another game in a baseball stadium, Rutgers Notre Dame in the Pinstripe Bowl in Yankee Stadium.
Notre Dame's kind of making that Pinstripe Bowl their own little thing, aren't they?
Yeah, I think what it was I think one of the ACC teams didn't qualify, so Notre Dame got to go in the spot. And Notre Dame likes to claim New York as one of its own little places. So,
well, that was it last year, or the year before, Syracuse, and I don't remember who they played. That turned out to be a really good game, that Pinstripe Bowl.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at because you're used to seeing the baseball there, and I think the setup there at Yankee Stadium is a little bit better than it is in San Francisco.
Yeah,
they play another one in the Tropicana field down in Tampa, which is not great to see on its own.
That's I think that's where Ohio University is going this year. Is the whatever they're calling the St. Petersburg Bowl?
Isn't the Beef O'Brady's Bowl?
That might be it.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. I think probably the most interesting non-BCS matchup for me, the Alamo Bowl. Oregon and Texas. These are two teams that have been good for a while, teams that we want to see match up against each other. And, it's an exhibition, and maybe it's Mac Brown's swan song there. But I think that's probably going to be a very interesting game to play out on the field there in San Antonio.
It'll be a good one, I think. It depends on if Texas shows up to play or not, because they could be pretty bad. But then so can Oregon, as we saw when they got smoked by Arizona.
ASU Texas Tech, go Devils.
Yeah.
University of Arizona, you get to go to Shreveport for New Year's. Enjoy that.
That's almost as good as going to Detroit as your big reward at the end of the season.
Shreveport, Alabama.
Louisiana.
Louisiana. What school plays in Shreveport? Do you even know?
I think
why is there a football stadium there?
There's one of the Louisianas, like the Lafayette or the who are the Raging Cajuns?
That's Lafayette.
Okay, one of the Louisiana schools. I don't know which one, but I think they play there.
Sun Bowl, Virginia Tech, UCLA. That could probably be a pretty good matchup.
Yeah.
Teams show up. Then we get to the January 1st Bowls. Usually a good game. Unfortunately, it's a rematch of a game that was played last year, just at a different spot. Nebraska, Georgia.
Yeah. That Georgia that won't even be close because I don't think Nebraska's
beat up.
I don't think Nebraska's even as good as their 8-4 record would indicate.
Let's see. Outback Bowl, Iowa, LSU, pretty good matchup. Wisconsin, South Carolina, Jadeveon Clowney gets to make another opportunity to have a hit that's going to be played all offseason in a Florida Bowl game against a Big Ten school.
He's going to need that to get that draft stock rising again.
Yep. And then the last one without the BCS is the Cotton Bowl there on January 3rd. The old Big 12 matchup of Oklahoma State, Missouri. Congratulations, Fox. That's your one bowl game you get to produce. And
speaking of that, why was the Big Ten game on Fox? Because the Big Ten's always either on ABC or ESPN, and all of a sudden,
the Big Ten was on ABC or Fox the last 2 years.
I know, but I don't understand that. That's the only game they show.
Well, they did do the Pac-12 the last 2 years before this year. I think it's because the Big Ten network is basically run through Fox.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
And they have the connection there. And I think that's what happened with the Pac-12 too. Because they have their own separate agreements with Fox. Fox will show one Pac-12 and one Big Ten game on the weekends, as well as the Big 12 too.
Okay,
but I think they shifted from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 because those two games were on Saturday as well as the Big Ten.
I had a mini heart attack for a second on Saturday night. I flipped onto ABC, and it was Florida State and Duke. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And then I realized that they were on Fox.
Yeah, but those are the bowl games. And one more bit of news, because really there's one more thing that happens between now and the bowl season. The Heisman Trophy finalists were announced today, Greg.
Okay.
And I don't know why anybody else is showing up, because once the sexual assault charges were dropped,
it was over.
This thing's over. You might as well have handed it to him at that press conference when they were dropped. But the Heisman Trophy finalists, 6 finalists were named, 4 quarterbacks, 2 running backs. 4 quarterbacks are Jordan Lynch of Northern Illinois, Johnny Manziel of Texas A&M,
really?
A.J. McCarron of Alabama, and Jameis Winston of Florida State. And the 2 running backs are Trey Mason from Auburn and Andre Williams of Boston College.
I'm surprised. Are you a little surprised Manziel's still in the running?
No.
Okay.
I think he was going to be a finalist. I don't think he's going to win.
No.
I thought he would, but they take the top 3 or 4 usually. And there were 6 finalists, but I don't know if I'm reading this thing weird or not, or if it was written out weird. But it sounds like only the quarterbacks are the ones that are invited to this thing. Not that it matters, because I think we all know Jameis Winston's going to win it.
Right.
I don't even know why. If I was one of the other guys, I don't know if I want to get my hopes up and go there, or if you just want to go there for the experience or whatever.
Take the free trip, yeah.
I guess.
There's a name that is auspicious by its absence there, and that would be Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
I thought he had a pretty good season. I realized that he wasn't in the national championship picture or anything, but then neither was Jordan Lynch. Now, granted, Lynch put up huge numbers.
He put up record numbers.
Yeah, but I'll just say this. Of the 2, if we're talking just a player, not necessarily a team he plays for, I think Bridgewater deserves to be a finalist more than McCarron does. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, but McCarron's never gotten the recognition. I think there was a lot of kind of groundswell for him this year to get that nomination finally.
A Lifetime Achievement Award, basically.
Right, exactly. And that's what the Heisman Trophy has been a couple times here over the last few years. But I think Bridgewater kind of got soured on early because of that early loss that they had to UCF. And nobody really thought much of Louisville as it was.
Right.
And so it really was just, Teddy Bridgewater. And if they go undefeated, they'll get back to a BCS game. But once they weren't undefeated, and once everyone kind of was like, well, maybe Louisville's just really not that great, nobody talked about Louisville after that.
That's true.
They were just kind of around. All Louisville talk died when they lost to UCF that day.
And he didn't really put up – he had a good season, but it wasn't anything that was earth-shattering that jumped off the page when you looked at it.
No, and according to some of the scouts, he's dropped down a little bit in their quarterback rankings too. And that's what happens when these quarterbacks stay that extra year.
Yeah.
It either works out really well for them, or it can go down the tubes for him. So Marcus Mariota, you're on lookout. Coming back next year.
Right.
It hasn't worked out in the past for a lot of these guys. You look at guys like Matt Barkley or Matt Leinart.
Right.
And it hasn't played out. But
I think you got to grab the money when it's there, but that's just me. But then again, you might have a guy like Mariota where they say you're going to be 3rd, 4th round pick this year, so he thinks I'll stay another year and see if I can move that up to a 2nd or 1st round pick. I can understand that logic.
Do you think the grabbing the money thing is different now than it was in the past? Because with the rookie salary schedule structure, you're not going to – if you're picked number 1 overall, you're not going to get just money thrown at your feet anymore like you were with guys like Jamarcus Russell.
Right.
You're going to have to earn some of that money. You're going to get a fair amount of money. I mean, let's not pick any hairs here. It's still going to be a good amount of money. But I think –
let me put it this way.
I think it's a little bit more advantageous to stay and maybe improve your stock, and especially in a quarterback-loaded field like it is this year, he's going to probably be at the top of next year's rankings, or maybe at the bottom or 2nd if Jameis Winston comes out. But
see, that's a good argument, because a guy like Mariota, if he comes out this year, if he's a 3rd-round pick, well, that's not going to be nearly as much money as if he – and again, you're right. You're not going to get the huge bonuses like Russell and everyone got before the rookie salary cap. But there's a huge difference between first-round money and third-round money. So that it would be advantageous to stick around with that kind of thinking. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I think that's all the college football news we have for now. Next time we get to talk about college football, we might even have to put it on the shelf for next week unless something happens.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we probably will
probably just talk about Jameis Winston winning the Heisman.
Yeah.
And, but between now and the 21st, absolutely, it's that weird dead zone in college football.
Right.
I don't know. I guess they have to have time for finals. That's why it's 2 weeks. But
well, and we'll also have we will have Nick Saban going to Alabama to talk about after Mac Brown gets fired and all that stuff. But
you mean to Texas
or Texas? What did I say?
You said to Alabama.
Well, yeah. He's going to go back to Alabama. That's.
I think he's going to stay. I'm
We'll
still not
see.
convinced that he's leaving.
I'm fairly convinced that if the job opens, he'll leave. But that's not going to happen until after bowl season anyway. So we won't even be able to get into that. But if there's a firing or something, I suppose we could talk about it.
Yeah, we'll probably have just a news and notes segment, but no on-field action for 2 weeks as we sit in quiet anticipation for Capital One Bowl week, month,
season. That's it. Capital One Bowl season.
Moving on to the NFL, Week 14 in the NFL, and we got off to a really bad start on Thursday. We're not talking about Thursday. I just want to point out the last couple of weeks have been a downer. Then you get the Thursday night game between Jacksonville and Texas. It's like, is this going to be more of the same? Sunday rolls around, and I wake up, and apparently there's 20 feet of snow all over the East Coast.
Yeah,
and it made for some entertaining, kind of weird contests all over the Eastern Seaboard there, but some of the scenes in Philly, especially more than in the other games, Calvin Johnson getting tackled into a pile of snow and having to sit out a play to clear all the snow out of his helmet.
Did you see his face when he came up out of the
Yes.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah, he's just caked in the snow, and Fox had to put down the first down technology. They had to make black numbers and lines for the field so people could tell. I can imagine what it would be like to be there and try to watch the game and not know where anyone actually was on the field without having to count.
I don't understand. They had nothing to remove that snow. You've got to. I'm just thinking if you're in a market like Philadelphia or Cleveland or Buffalo or a place where they get snow like that, wouldn't you have 10 snowblowers lined up just in case?
Well, some of these places do, and they were cleaning up the lines in Philly. And it was driving snow in the first half, so I don't think they were. Even if they had cleared it out, it would have just right back down. But you would have thought at halftime they tried to clear it out, and if it piles up again, it piles up again. But I don't know. It was weird. And really, in that Philly-Detroit game, it didn't make for good football. And the Lions played dumb again.
Yeah, shocking.
The Lions are letting this thing slip away from them. A 14-point loss there in Philadelphia.
Yes, they are.
Philadelphia is making a good run for themselves, kind of getting away from the wild card talk and keeping them up in the top of the division. But again, we were not going to talk about the Eagles or Cowboys until that final game. That's all I'm going to say about them. But the Lions, they're slipping. If when Aaron Rodgers comes back, and the Bears have been surprisingly competitive without
Jay Cutler.
Jay Cutler, there's his name, Jay Cutler. They've been surprisingly competitive without Jay Cutler, and the Lions they really don't seem to want to win this thing.
I've said it a bunch of times. All I've got to say about the Lions is this: you need to fire Jim Schwartz and that whole coaching staff and start over again,
right?
Because they can't get it done.
And with the snow and all that, they obviously weren't. The Lions are better as a passing team, and they weren't able to pass all that effectively in the snow. I get that, but if you know that you're going to have to play a game like this, just knuckle down and play it. You have big guys. You have some great running backs in Joique Bell and Reggie Bush. Maybe try short passes to Calvin Johnson. You're not going to be airing it out. Fine. You got to change up your game plan. And you got to push forward with it because the Lions are a better team than the Eagles. They shouldn't be losing this game. They shouldn't be turning the ball over 3 times. And the snow is slippery and whatever. But one of those, Matthew Stafford just wasn't looking. The center hiked the ball. It hit off Stafford's face, and they lost the football. And I think that led to a touchdown for Philadelphia too. And you look at the score. Philly didn't get anything going really to the fourth quarter. 28 points in the fourth, and again, it has to do with the weather. But if you're the Lions, you just cannot let this happen.
You just like you just said though. You said you need to be able if you're going to have to play in a game like that, you knuckle down and play it. Well, guess what? they couldn't make the adjustments. Why? Because the coaching staff is just, I don't know if they're overwhelmed. I don't know what their problem is, but that's exactly why they get into a game like that. They were lost. They didn't know what to do. They could not adjust to the conditions. Where Philly, I thought, did a pretty good job of making it work, at least at the end of the game. But Detroit, let me put it this way. As a Green Bay Packers fan, sitting here after losing all those games, finally getting a win, and still only be, a half game back?
Something like that.
Yeah, come on. I mean, there's no reason in the world the Packers should still be in this, yet they are, because the Detroit Lions just can't get out of their own way.
Yeah, the Packers are a game and a half back.
Okay, but still, the point remains that they should have been out of it by a long shot by now, and they're not.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's or maybe it is just a half game. I lied. But yeah, it's. And depending on what happens in the Monday night game tonight, which, the Bears could very easily win, because the Cowboys aren't exactly the greatest thing to ever play the game. I don't know. I think no matter what, this Lions team isn't going to, even if they make the playoffs, they're not going to do anything with it.
No.
I think it's just the final days of Jim Schwartz in Detroit. And, you did a good job getting the Lions to some relevancy again, thanks to some talented players on your roster. But since that first or second season, whatever it was, when they made the playoffs and had those 10 wins, they haven't done a thing with it, and pretty disappointing there in Detroit.
Well, that's the thing. Just really quickly to wrap up the Lions, are the players all just that dumb? Maybe it's not the coaching staff. I can't imagine that's the case. But
I think the only guy I would put that on is maybe Ndamukong Suh. But from all that I can see, Calvin Johnson's a pretty composed guy. Matt Stafford's a pretty composed guy. Reggie Bush even. I don't know what it is. They're missing something, and I think it stems from the top there.
Yep.
I think it's very similar to a Houston Texans situation where we saw Gary Kubiak finally get fired this week.
Yeah.
And I think that was tough for them to do, especially with the health thing that happened earlier the year. But they did what they had to do, and I think this is the same situation where you have all the talent, everything's set there for you. You've been decently successful the past few years, but you just don't have it. And the Lions, I hope that they go ahead and do this and don't wait for the real fallout like the Texans had to this year.
Right.
But I think the door is open for Jim Schwartz to walk on out of there.
Because they've got talent. They should be better than they are.
Other important games over there in the snow. The two other games there in the AFC, really important to that wild card spot, and it really kind of affected by the conditions, at least early on. We'll start in Pittsburgh. Dolphins and Steelers, a pretty good back-and-forth contest all the way through. Ben Roethlisberger, first touchdown pass in the first quarter. He now holds the all-time Pittsburgh Steeler mark for touchdown passes, passing Terry Bradshaw, which probably only a matter of time. But
sure.
But I was actually pretty impressed by the Dolphins to go into a cold environment like that against a physical team like the Steelers, a team that's also – they were barely hanging on to any playoff hopes now, and they were a team that you thought that they were going to sneak into the playoffs, Greg. But the Dolphins are the ones that go into Pittsburgh and come out with a pretty impressive 34-28 victory and hold on to a tie for the final playoff spot there in the AFC.
Well, and what's impressive about the Dolphins, too, is they did it late. It was one of those – it wasn't where they just came in and blew out the Steelers. Pittsburgh's a tough place to play, no matter what the circumstances are. And for the Dolphins, a warm weather team, to come into those conditions and get the job done, they seem to be recovering from the whole Richie Incognito ordeal that's suddenly gone very quiet. But and the Steelers, I guess, just didn't quite have enough. I thought maybe they could put together a little bit of a run at the end of the season and still kind of sneak into a playoff spot, but they're just not there talent-wise. They're just a little short. And good for the Dolphins. That was an impressive win by them on Sunday.
Yeah, just like we mentioned in all these games, the weather really early on affected play. And it's something I want to talk about in a minute because we're obviously going to be dealing with this in the Super Bowl maybe. But the Dolphins were able to turn it on late. Only 200 yards passing from Tannehill, but 3 passing touchdowns. 97 yards for Clay. Good running game, too, for Julius Thomas. Just a very impressive little showing there for the Dolphins to keep them in stride, and they probably would have been ahead had it not been for just a wild ending in Baltimore. It's so funny to just look at the box score right now. You see the score by quarter, and okay, just like in the other games, very slow early. 7-0 after the first, 7-3 after the second, and even going into the fourth quarter, it was only 7-6. And then things kind of got a little wacky. 20 points for the Vikings in the fourth quarter, 22 points for the Ravens, and a 29-26 win for the Ravens over the Vikings. And that last 2 minutes and 7 seconds of the game. This is how this thing plays out. So it's what is that now? That would be 12 to, or that would be, yeah, it was 12-8 with the Vikings ahead. Joe Flacco throws a touchdown pass to Dennis Pitta. Extra point is, or the 2-point conversion is good. And so with 2:07 left in the game, Ravens up 15-12. You think, okay, this is going to be a fight to the end, one defensive stop and this thing's over. Right on the other side of the 2-minute warning, Toby Gerhart with a 41-yard run. With Toby Gerhart in as Adrian Peterson was out with a hip injury. Tough to see him go down. But 41-yard run to put the Vikings back ahead 19-15, 1:45 left. Same idea. Okay, all we got to do is get a stop, and this thing's going to be over, done. We're going to come out of Baltimore with the victory. Except the ensuing kickoff, Jacoby Jones runs it back 77 yards. Extra point is good, and now the Ravens back up 22-19. Hey, 1:27 left. All we got to do is stop them, and the game's over. Right? Wrong. Cordell Patterson, 79-yard pass for Matt Castle, 26-22, 1:01 left in the game. Okay, this you can't go on like this forever. This is the end of the game. Joe Flacco has some late magic in him, but all we got to do is hold them. They're not going to chuck it 50 yards here in the snow. We'll be fine.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, go
ahead. they move their way down the field, just one after the other, and then with 9 seconds left, Joe Flacco throws it a little high. Marlon Brown grabs it at the top of it, tiptoes on the end line, and the Ravens take the lead 29-26, and that was all she wrote. Only 9 seconds. I think that was enough to finally say this is the end of the game, and the Ravens come out of there with just a crazy win. I think it's the most touchdowns scored in the final 5 or 2 minutes of a game in NFL history, if I remember reading the stat right.
Well, you talked about all the points that both teams put up in the fourth quarter. What you failed to mention was that most of them came with 2 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, 2:07 left in the game.
It was the most entertaining end to an NFL game I think I've ever seen. Was it good? No. There was the weather still played a role in it, but wow, was it something to watch. It was amazing.
Yeah. And especially what was on the line for Baltimore in this game.
Right.
They stay at 7-6. They own the tiebreaker over the Dolphins, and they're in the 6th seed as it is right now. But it was just nuts, and especially considering the conditions and the teams and everything that played out, and just 41-yard run, 77-yard touchdown return, 79-yard pass, and then a 1-minute drill led by Joe Flacco and the Ravens to take this one. You wouldn't think the Vikings-Ravens would have the finish of the year, but this one just might have been the finish of the year.
Well, we talked about last week, we talked about how the NFL doesn't seem as exciting as college football does in rivalry weekend. What could they do to make it as exciting? I think this came pretty darn close. Was it as exciting as Auburn, Alabama? No, but I don't know that it gets any better than that in the NFL. It was insane. And I just want to throw this in. We've been talking about who are the Ravens this year. You said it last week. I'm going to say it this week. I think maybe the Ravens are this year's Ravens.
Yeah, and really I think as it stands now, the other teams are kind of falling back to the pack. Yes, the Chargers got to win. Yes, the Bills are out of it now, even though we picked them to be some sort of late sleeper. One by one, the teams are falling off. The Jets aren't going to do anything of it. Tennessee's not coming back. Pittsburgh's not coming back. And so it's Baltimore, Miami, and San Diego. San Diego only a game behind those other two, but San Diego still has games. They play the Broncos this Thursday, and I think they have one more game against the Chiefs in San Diego. So San Diego's going to have some luck to help them there. Miami still has a game against the Patriots. Baltimore probably has the easiest schedule left out of the two teams. I'm pulling up their schedule right now.
Actually, I think their last 3 are pretty tough, actually.
Baltimore's pretty tough, too. Detroit, yeah. New England, and Cincy. I think
they're all winnable games for the Ravens. That's the thing.
They're winnable games. I mean, especially with the way the Lions have played, winnable. With the way the Patriots looked the other day, maybe winnable. And that's a game that's always been close over the last several years. And Cincinnati, they may not have anything to play for in that final game other than just bragging rights.
Right.
Like I said, the Chargers have games against the Broncos and the Chiefs still on the schedule. The Dolphins, The Dolphins play the Patriots this week, and then Buffalo and the Jets. So Miami actually has the easier schedule. Even if they lose the New England game, I think
they're still in good shape.
Whoever's going to win this thing, I think the Chargers are probably going to have to win out. They're probably going to have to win all three of their games. And with like the two that I mentioned, I don't think that happens. Impressive win for the Chargers over the Giants. I was actually there in San Diego this weekend. But, man, did the Giants look like an awful football team. Oh, God. They were awful. And they still hate Eli a little bit down there. Just a little bit.
So I've noticed.
Yeah. Booing him every time he came on the field. Eli sucks chance. And that was at the end of the field where Eli started his drives many times. So I got to be right in the midst of that, so that was interesting. But yeah, I think the Dolphins have the inside track on this one.
But yeah, and it puts me in the weird spot of rooting for the Baltimore Ravens because they play Detroit next week. And I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be back, but all of a sudden I'm rooting for teams that I would never root for. But I'm with you. The Dolphins probably have the easiest path. But in the NFL this year, as easy as it looks, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they lost both of those games to the Jets and the Bills. It's just been that kind of season.
It's hard to put a finger on. And, I mean, we've tried pinning it down the last several weeks. We're not going to know until the final game's played. I think that's pretty clear.
Yep.
Unless the Dolphins win the next two and the Ravens lose the next two, and then it's really kind of sorted itself out. But we'll see. There's still plenty to be decided there. I mentioned the Patriots. Really tough game for them against the Browns. Tougher than you would really want it to be if you're the Patriots. They end up getting a very tight win, 27-26, thanks to the aid of a pretty borderline bad pass interference call there at the end. I didn't see any pass interference on that one. Did you?
No. But I also, and again, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second. This is one of those times where if you wanted to make the argument that the NFL always wants the marquee teams to win and will do what they can to make sure that happens, this play would fit right into that conspiracy theory. I will just say that.
Yeah. Well, I think if that was the case, I think they would have won in Carolina too. But
that's true. But Tom Brady did it again, and what can you say about the guy at this point? The Browns, you can blame the pass interference call all you want. They still had to get there to do it, to throw the pass to get the call. The Browns had chances to stop them and couldn't do it. So, the call was questionable. I think, again, as a Browns fan, I think it could have gone either way. I know that most Browns fans would probably want me to go, oh, no, they got screwed, but it was questionable, but it wasn't as horrible as a lot of people thought it was as far as the call went. But
the Browns were up pretty good for at least the late portions of that game.
Yeah.
And, okay, the Patriots go down and get one score, fine. You know they're coming out with an onside kick.
Yep.
You got to jump on that thing. And Brown touched it first.
Yep.
And he just couldn't grab it. And the Patriots using their magical, mystical ways. Tom Brady's golden stare on it on the field probably distracted the Browns, let them get that onside kick, and then leads them right down. 418 yards for Brady in the snow, in the cold. Who's better at a cold snow game like Tom Brady in that?
Nobody. That's the thing that you can't leave when you're playing the Patriots unless you're up by 5 or 6 touchdowns. You can't leave them any time. And the Browns proved that yesterday. It was an amazing performance by Brady and the Patriots. I give them all the credit in the world. And again, the Browns had chances to stop them and couldn't get it done. So you can blame the call all you want, but a lot of things had to get to that point where that call even mattered.
Big win for the Patriots, but unfortunately a big loss. They lose Rob Gronkowski again.
Yeah.
The last 2 years it's been a left broken arm, a right broken arm. He had back surgery in college, and now torn ACL and MCL out for the season. And he got a concussion on the play. And so I don't know if big physical guy Rob Gronkowski, Yosoi Mi Fiesta, you think that he's indestructible, but he's been pretty fragile here over the last few years. And I think I don't necessarily want to talk about that because I don't think that's fair to Gronkowski. I think it's just been some bad situations. But this is something the NFL is probably going to have to live with now.
Yep.
Because they don't want players attacking the head.
Right.
And that's clear. They want concussions out of the game. Fine, we all agree that that's what needs to happen. But after the game, the Browns defender, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, he did say that he was when he was going in for the hit, he was consciously avoiding the head. He knew he didn't want to hit him in the head, so he went low. And he went low, and he went right into Gronkowski's knees, which then flung over, and it was kind of weird to see the leg wiggle like that. But took out his ACL, and that's honestly concussions obviously have the lingering effects of the brain damage, but in the immediate, an ACL is a much more devastating injury to happen because Gronkowski's, he's had the broken arms, so he was going to be out for a few months as it was. But add in the ACL in there too, that's just, it's devastating, and I think the NFL just has to kind of accept that football is a violent sport. Whether you can hit anybody anywhere and you can hurt them at any sort of time.
What they have to do is they have to pick their poison, because what you had happen yesterday, and again, I'm not trying to belittle the concussion or how serious it is, but you're exactly right. A concussion, you can come back in a couple weeks. When you blow out both your MCL and your ACL, you're gone for a good long while. I mean, there's probably a chance that he may not come back at the beginning of next season.
I wouldn't think. No, I think there's no way. Especially after teams. We saw Adrian Peterson, but I think seeing RG3 this year, I think a lot of people are going to pull back on that a little bit too.
Well, yeah, you can't use Adrian Peterson as a comparison because what he did was superhuman, basically.
Yeah.
And you can't expect everyone else to live up to that. But the NFL has to pick which way they want to go with this, because this is what you're going to see. We saw a star player go down yesterday for a very long time because the defender was afraid to go to just tackle him like he normally would. He made a conscious decision to go for the legs. So what happens? You lose Gronkowski, and then maybe next week you lose Calvin Johnson to the same type of thing, and all of a sudden, instead of concussions, now you've got players dropping left and right for very long, extended periods of time because the players don't want to go for the head. So you're right. The NFL has to just come to terms with the fact it's a violent league, and we'll do what we can, but you also can't push it so far in one direction that something like what happened to Gronkowski starts happening a lot more, which I think we're going to see more of as players get used to playing with these rules. They're going to start going for the legs more because they don't want that 15-yard penalty or the fine or anything else that comes with it.
Yep, and we've seen a fair amount of ACL injuries over the last few years too, and maybe that's been some sort of side product of this already. And now, just with a big guy like Gronkowski going out, this kind of discussion gets started. And players have been saying it for a long time. It's difficult to play defense in the NFL. We said it for a long time, tackling the quarterback, that there's no place to hit the quarterback anymore.
Nope.
You can't hit him below the knees. You can't hit him above the shoulders. Where else are you supposed to? Right in the middle. But in the heat of battle, that's not going to happen. And then in the secondary, when you guys got flying all over the place, okay, you tell them to avoid the head, fine. Don't hit a defenseless receiver. They're going to try their best. But at high speed, when two people are running at each other like that, not having a stationary quarterback and somebody running at them, it's even more unlikely they're going to be able to make that decision in real time. And if that's – I don't know if that's just going to lead to a decline in defense or –
I think it already has.
Well, yeah, I think some of the I think that has also led to a lot of teams – you see a lot of teams not being able to tackle as well anymore. And I think that's part of it is, you're trying to change up all your styles. And, people are trying to go for kill shots, and you're kind of indecisive on what you're going to do, where you're supposed to hit this guy. And maybe that plays into it, but, maybe we're thinking too much into it. But at the end of the day, it's just rough. It's getting harder to deal with these injuries. You're not going to make them play in robo suits or anything like that. I don't know what the NFL is going to do from here. If they react to this at all, I would hope they would, but who knows with the NFL? Maybe it'll take them 2 years to finally figure it out. But
I guess maybe at the end of the day that the NFL just decides that they would rather have Gronkowski walk with a limp for the rest of his life than not know who he is when he's 50, I suppose. If that's one way to look at it. But I would like to see numbers and see if injuries have increased since the safety rules as they've been enforced more, if the injuries have gone up because of things like this. But that's another discussion for another time.
Elsewhere in the NFL, my Colts, another very slow start. They were even with the Bengals there in the second half. Both teams scored 28 points in the second half, but nothing going to the beginning of the game. And the Bengals now take over that third seed in the AFC. And hopefully the Bengals can lose to some of these teams that are trying to beat them and get some playoff position down the stretch. Or it looks like the Colts are going to be stuck there in that fifth seed now because they just simply decided not to show up in the first half in Cincinnati. And they're going to be the ones that get the honor of playing the Chiefs there in the first round, which may not be a bad thing, but
You've said it a lot the past few weeks that this not showing up in the first half was going to come back to bite him, and it certainly did on Sunday against the Bengals.
Yep.
The Bengals are in a good spot right now.
Yeah. Andrew Luck even had a pretty good game, 326, 4 touchdowns. Good game for Andrew Luck. Good game for, who was our running back or a receiver that I've never heard of in my life? Derrick Rogers. 6 carries or 6 receptions for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns. And this running game is just abysmal. Our leading rusher for the Colts on Sunday, Andrew Luck, 2 carries, 32 yards.
Yeah. How did Trent Richardson do? Well, I know he's not starting anymore.
I don't know, and I don't care.
Okay. I don't blame you.
I wasn't able to watch this one. I got to watch it on silent on a big screen for about a quarter outside of Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego. And like I mentioned last week, I like going to football games. I like going to live sporting events. But going to an NFL game is an all-day affair, and I missed everything that happened. I had to watch it post-haste. So, unfortunately, didn't get to experience all this in real time. But
I will tell you really quick. Trent Richardson, 6 rushes, 20 yards.
Yeah.
A little over 3 a carry, so he's right where he's supposed to be. His long run of the day, 8 yards.
I don't think the Colts – it's obvious now I don't think the Colts are going to do anything. Maybe they could still probably win that first-round playoff game against Kansas City, especially if it's going to be at home. But if they don't draft a running back we don't even have a first-round draft pick.
That's okay, though. You can get a good running back after the first round. Yeah,
they picked up some guys off waivers today. Guys that, haven't played. I think it was Choice. Do you remember the running back Choice?
No.
Well, he's been in the league. He's some.
But when you're going dumpster diving in week 13, that's not a good sign.
No, it is not. But great showing by the Bengals. They've had their ups and downs, but they've been up more than others. And Bengals sitting at 9-4, sitting pretty there in the third spot, looking to host. Maybe the Bengals. I don't know if the Bengals even want that spot because they probably have to play. If they get that spot, they might just have to play the Ravens 2 out of 3 weeks, and that might be not a great proposition for Cincinnati.
It never is. I don't care who the 2 teams are to have to do that. Especially, it just always seems like that if you're the division leader and you end up having to play a team from your division, the division team that you play always seems to end up winning. I don't know why that is, but it just seems to be the case a lot of the times.
Yeah, people say it's hard enough to beat a team twice in the regular season. If you got to play them a third time, that just increases those chances, especially in the NFL. But
yeah, the Bengals, we talked about them all season. They had a lot of talent, and if they could put it together, they would be a pretty solid football team. You want to talk about a group of people that are probably madder about the New England, Cleveland outcome than Cleveland fans for the Bengals fans, because that would have put them
right there.
They would have been in the number 2 seed. Yeah, so now they've got to hope that they keep winning and the Patriots lose again somewhere along the road. So, as if they needed another reason to hate Cleveland, they've got one now.
Well, luckily for them, the Patriots have to play the Ravens and Dolphins, so maybe they could trip up there as though 2 teams fight for a playoff spot, but. I don't know. It looks more like the Patriots are in control of the playoff division seeding if you look at the schedules like that.
Right.
But good win for the Bengals. Another bad loss for the Colts.
The Colts. I just don't know what happened here. Is it just injuries, the lack of the running game? You go back. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. You go back. Reggie Wayne went down, and it's not been the same ever since. It's just amazing.
I think in the NFL more than any other league, I think we said it at the beginning of the year when we talked about the Texans. If you're not changing, you're losing ground.
Right.
And I think the problem with the Colts is they've had these issues all season. They haven't been able to run. They had trouble starting games. And sure, you can get by that at the beginning when people aren't used to it. But now that they've had 13 weeks of game planning on you, they know how you play. They know how you start. They know what your deficiencies are. Yeah. They know how to attack you. They've seen other teams beat you. They know where those teams beat you, and they're trying to exploit it themselves. It gets them into a tough spot in these last few weeks of the season because everyone knows what the problem is, and the Colts don't know how to fix it, and everyone else is going to go out and attack it, and it's devastating to them. It's just you can't live on the same line all year long. So they got to start changing something up. They got to find some scheme to get any semblance of a running game, whether it's just swing passes or shovel passes or what. But they need to figure out something here quick.
Well, you're right, because if you look back at those huge wins they had, they all came, I think, before the halfway point of the season.
Yeah.
The San Francisco win, the Seattle win. I don't remember. The Broncos win was what, about week 8, week 9, somewhere in there?
Yeah, right around the middle, but yeah.
Yeah, so you're right. As things progress, they're game planning against them, and it's starting to cost them, yeah. But I do know they're capable of playing great football. They just haven't been doing it lately.
That's still the most frustrating thing about this team. I know they can do it. They just
right.
haven't. Whether it's the other teams beating them up or if it's just a mental thing where they're like, well, we can't play in the first quarter. But if we hang around, Andy will be able to bail us out at the end. Can't do it all the time. He had a really great game, but if he gets, if the defense can get a couple more stops there in the second half or even the first half, if, the running back finally breaks one, the whole game gets a whole lot easier for everybody else. But that is what that is. The other question we had going into the week, there was a lot of talk about Peyton Manning and his record in cold weather games. It was going to be really cold in Denver this week, and they were playing the Titans, who were kind of in the playoff race. And, you watch that game on Sunday, and, man, is Peyton Manning really bad in the cold or what, Greg?
Well, 51 points later, I guess we've got our answer to that question, don't we?
Yeah, 397 yards, 4 touchdowns. And as Peyton said on a radio show after the game, all those that were criticized his record in cold games, they can shove it where the sun don't shine, or his words after the game against the Titans. And Peyton did his old team a favor as he beats the Titans. The Colts clinched the AFC South, the first team to clinch a division in the NFL this season.
Oh, see, it's not all bad then.
Yeah, it's not all bad. We clinched the division. Denver clinched a playoff spot. Seattle clinched the playoff spot the other night, too.
I will say this about one of the things I've been one of the leaders on the bandwagon of bashing Peyton in cold weather. I guess no one thought about what would happen if you pissed him off, and that seems to be what happened here, and probably not the best idea to make him mad because he really came out and took it out on the poor old Titans yesterday.
And I think something else that goes into him playing in Denver, and now when he played in Indy, he never even had to deal with the cold weather ever.
Right.
And so when he went to go play in it, he was never used to it. So maybe now that he's actually playing in a cold city, maybe he's able to get used to it and practice in it a little bit and have some sort of familiarity with it,
right,
to where he can overcome it. And again, but he wanted to prove everybody wrong. He was playing against the Titans. Maybe it was just a very good situation for Peyton to show what he was worth in this game. But he did what he needed to do. Another impressive performance by him.
I don't think that the Titans are that bad that it was just he got lucky or whatever people want to say. Because I heard people on Dan Patrick today saying, well, it was just the Titans. Show me when this and that and the other thing. The Titans, while are not a good team, if Peyton's that bad in the cold, he wouldn't have hung 51 points on a pretty decent defense. So
yeah, and people are also going to point to the New England game where the running game kind of buoyed him for most of the game. But then you look at the Kansas City game. He played pretty well in Kansas City. Kansas City's cold.
Yeah.
So who knows? But the other thing of note in this game, a record was set.
Yes.
Up at the mile-high thin air, Matt Prater, a 64-yard field goal from the other side of the 50-yard line.
Yep.
And Matt Prater breaks the old record of Dempsey. Tom Dempsey?
Yeah, there was 3 other guys, too, I think, that had tied it. I want to say...
Yeah, I think Jason Elam did
it. Yeah.
In Denver, too.
Right.
I don't remember the others, but I know I remember watching Jason Elam. No, you know who else did it? What's his face? Kevin Akers.
Okay, yeah.
He did it in Green Bay with San Francisco, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was a 60. That's been a record since, wow, when did Dempsey do it? 70, I think?
Yeah, 73, I think.
Something like that. But, yeah, but you know what? I think that just to talk about it for a second, we've reached the point where I don't know that you can go much further than 64 yards.
Yeah, because he barely got it over the goalpost.
Yeah, it took Payne off the backside of the crossbar. Yeah, in Denver, yeah.
You would think, there was a lot of people that always thought that Sebastian Janikowski would be able to do it in one of these games against the Broncos. Because, he can kick the football a mile, but
right.
It's time and place and accuracy, and a lot of things have to go into it. Like, you never even attempt those things unless, like it was no time left on the clock, end of the first half. What are they going to do? Return it all the way for a touchdown?
Maybe.
Alabama. It's like, to try the long field goal. What's the worst that can happen? But he was able to get it through. And, so congrats to Matt Prater and the Broncos.
I think he's going to hold that record for a good long time. I don't, because like you said, I don't see anyone taking a shot at a 65-yarder.
Not at sea level either.
Especially when you've seen what's happened with Alabama and the Bears guy that did it a few years back. And And people, now that they're running him out of the end zone, you're just not going to see it. So that's going to be there for a good long while. Plus, like I said, I don't believe that we can go much past 64 yards and still be able to kick it that far. That's just kind of reached the limit.
Maybe the only time you might be able to see it is if one of those weird free kick situations pops up again.
Right.
But again, something very rare, not something you can ever rely on happening. And even the guys that have tried it have not even gotten close when they tried it. So who knows?
Right.
Couple last things here. Right around the wild card picture over the NFC. Earlier in the day, the Cardinals, easy win over the Rams. They go to 8-5. So they have a pretty good chance with the 49ers playing the Seahawks. You think that the Cardinals have a pretty good shot at tying up again for the 8th seed or the 6th seed, there in the NFC. But a good hard-fought game for the 49ers.
Yes.
Come back late on the Seahawks to win that one 19-17. And, it was not the same thing as the game in Seattle. I don't think you play Seattle anywhere outside of Seattle, it's not going to be the same thing. But a really gutsy effort from the 49ers because they know they need to keep winning to avoid being tied with Arizona and having something catastrophic happen at the end of the year when they play them. And they stay ahead, and they're currently in that 6th seed in the NFC over Arizona.
I tell you what, their defense has just impressed me a lot over the past few weeks. They have got a really tough defense, but I still say that offense has some issues.
Yes.
And I get that it was against the Seattle Seahawks, who have a great defense, but something's not clicking on the offensive side of the ball for the 49ers. So, yes, they're hanging in it. I still don't like their chances a whole lot come playoff time because I just don't know that the defense can carry them far enough. And if they don't fix the offensive issues, it's going to be interesting come playoff time, I'll say that.
Yeah, I don't put this on the Seahawks at all. They played pretty well.
Yeah.
Just a game. San Francisco was inspired. They needed to prove something. They have playoff hopes still hanging on the line. They could deny the Seahawks the division title for a week more. So plenty of emotion for the 49ers to put into it. But I think they're still going to be okay when it comes to the playoff seed because, yes, the Cardinals are a game behind them, but the Cardinals still have to go to Seattle.
Right.
Unless the 49ers trip up somewhere on one of these games, and I don't think they will.
Well, I was just going to say, they've got a classic trap game coming up next Sunday against Tampa Bay. A Tampa Bay team that hasn't played bad football of late. So
no.
I would have to say that the 49ers are good enough to be able to go into Tampa and get a win, but you also don't want to overlook the Buccaneers is all I'm saying.
Right, and Atlanta's played pretty tight here at the end of the year, but the Cardinals have to go to Seattle. They're not going to win that game.
No.
I don't, unless Russell Wilson comes down with the flu and every member of the 12th man comes down with the flu also. The Cardinals, they have a winnable game this week at Tennessee, but then at Seattle, tough, and then the final game of the year. If it's still a one-game cushion, I don't know how the tiebreakers would work out in that final game, but if you're the Cardinals, you got to hope San Francisco slips up and then you're tied going into that game so you know exactly what needs to happen to win that one. But
the Cardinals are pretty much in a position right now where they just have to keep winning.
Yep.
One more loss probably ends it for them.
Yep. Because they can't count on the 49ers losing any of these games down the stretch. Because, you got Tampa Bay and Atlanta, two teams they should beat. Two teams from the NFC South where the division lead was on the line Sunday night. Panthers on an 8-game winning streak going into the Superdome. The Saints just got blitzed by the Seahawks last week on Monday night. And the Saints continue to be undefeated at home. They're pretty much as unbeatable in the Superdome as the Seahawks are in Seattle. 31-13 win over the Panthers. Panthers, they had the 6-0 lead there after the first quarter. They just didn't seem like they were able to finish their drives well enough. And then Drew Brees and the Saints just explode back there in the second quarter, 21 points. Yep. Drew Brees, over 50,000 passing yards. One of the I think he's the fourth fastest guy to get there.
Right.
Passing up Elway, who was fourth before that. But
I'll tell you the stat that really impressed me last night, he's already over 4,000 yards for the season.
Right.
With 3 games to go. And it wasn't that long ago that a 4,000-yard season was like the benchmark. That was a really superb season, and now here he is with 3 games to play, and he's already there.
Yeah,
but he's something else.
He's something else. The Saints just unbeatable at home.
Right.
The Panthers got another shot against them in 2 weeks, but the Panthers, they're now tied with San Francisco there in the 5-6 spot. maybe if the Panthers go into some sort of tailspin, maybe they lose that second game against the Saints. Maybe they're the ones who have to look out for the Cardinals, who are sneaking up right behind them too.
Sure.
Because who do the Panthers have? They have the Saints. They play the Jets this week, who could be that could be a trap game too.
Yeah.
In between the two Saints games, and they finish up at Atlanta. It's not out of the question for the Panthers to maybe go into a tailspin here.
Right.
But they got to win at least the New Orleans game, but the other two games should be winnable. It's solidifying itself a little bit. Cardinals holding on for dear life, but I don't think there's going to be too much changes over there in the NFC.
Lots of Arizona Cardinal fans wishing their team was in the AFC right now.
Yeah.
But out of everybody that's left, I'm looking at the playoff field. Who do you think has a legitimate shot at going into Seattle and winning in the playoffs of all the teams that are left, that are going to make the playoffs probably?
I would have said Carolina just because of the way they run the ball and they're able to play defense, but didn't seem to make much of a difference playing at New Orleans this week. And before last week, I would have said New Orleans, but that didn't make much of a difference either.
I would say I'll stick with the Panthers, but it would take a lot of things to fall exactly the way they need them to fall in a game at Seattle. If the Seahawks get home field advantage, I just can't imagine them not making the Super Bowl at that point.
Yeah, I would either put the Panthers or the 49ers only because they know what to expect.
Right.
And that's not saying that they didn't know what to expect early in the year when they got blown out, or last year when they got blown out up there. But they have the experience, they have the history behind it. Maybe they have some motivation to go in there and do it. But that would be the only, not necessarily from an X's and O standpoint, but just simply a mindset that they know how to play up in Seattle.
Right.
But they haven't been too successful knowing what they have to face up there. So who knows? I agree with you. You want to try to find someone that might be able to do it. I don't think anybody can. I see no way that Seattle's not in the Super Bowl at the end of this thing.
Unless a team like the Eagles, or just it's going to take a fluke of some sort. I think if the Seahawks get home field, which looks like they're probably going to get at this point.
Yeah.
It has happened. New Orleans did it. A 7-9 New Orleans team went in there a few years ago, but
that they didn't have the mystique back then. Right. That wasn't the same team,
and they weren't as good as this team is either.
Yeah.
The Seahawks weren't. So if the Seahawks get home field, we're going to have to look at those ugly uniforms in the Super Bowl, unfortunately.
In the Super Bowl, and after seeing what we saw this weekend, I don't know if I even want to watch the Super Bowl. You saw the way the snow affected at least the first half of those games and the weather. If that's the case in the Super Bowl, you want your champion to be determined by the play on the field,
right? Not
by outside circumstances. But if this is the case, I don't know how it's not going to be any sort of effect. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
As much as when you first hear, like, oh my God, football in the snow, oh, that looks awesome on TV. Look at the hits. Okay, this is great. But then you actually start paying attention to what's happening in between the lines, and it's not all that enjoyable.
No, it's bad football, and the offense has such a huge advantage because they know which direction they're headed. You saw it happen in the Philadelphia game yesterday. You saw it happen to some extent in Baltimore. You saw it in Pittsburgh. But a Super Bowl, if we get a storm like that, like they had in Philadelphia yesterday in the Super Bowl, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah,
because you're not even talking about just the play on the field. People trying to get there. It's going to be awful. And
yep. And the NFL had or at least the host committee had a press conference today talking about some of these things, and concerning getting to the Super Bowl and all the events around it. There's going to be no tailgating at the Super Bowl. Not that there is anyway, from what I understand, because it's a lot of people in suits, and half the parking spaces are taken up by other crap. So no tailgating may not be a big deal because it's a Super Bowl, but you can't drive there. There's only like 13,000 parking passes, so you can't drive yourself there. You can't take taxis to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
They won't let them anywhere near the stadium. You won't be able to walk into the Super Bowl because of the, the security procedures around it. You won't just be able to simply walk down the street to it. You're going to have to either take the subway or the transit right to the Meadowlands station, or go to one of the Fan Express stations where they can drive you to the game.
Wow. That's not the worst idea. Having been to that area before, that's probably a pretty smart approach, actually.
Right, but
if we get a blizzard, it's going to be a mess.
Well, between all that and hearing all these things, and I guess these are going to be regular policies now, I don't know if I would ever want to go to a Super Bowl.
I wouldn't.
I think, between, maybe your team's in it, so you'd be excited to be there. But if it's not, if it's the Seahawks and the Ravens, let's say, and, especially in this game, if it's cold and it's windy and it's snowing and all the people that are the corporate sponsors get the good seats and you're sitting up top,
right,
and the longer commercial breaks and the long halftime,
right,
and it's a pain in the ass to get to and from any of these places. And it's, they said, I think they read it's like a $60 bus fare to get there. And, it just doesn't seem like it'd be any better. I think the better experience would be at home with a bunch of your friends,
yep,
or people that you want to hang out with, watching the game in an air-conditioned, heated room with snacks and food and multiple TVs and the betting games that you can have on and all that stuff. The Super Bowl is not an in-person event. It's a television event.
The Super Bowl is the place where if you're a corporate guy or someone like that and you want to impress your clients, your other people in your business, that's who goes to the Super Bowl. People like you and me, we don't go to the Super Bowl.
No.
That's not what it's about. I would go to a Super Bowl if I could sit in a luxury suite and have all the conveniences I have at home. That's the only way I'd really be interested in going to one, because of the expense, the trouble to get there, the whole thing. I flew out of Miami. Was it the year? I flew on Super Bowl weekend a few years ago, and even just that alone was a hassle.
Yeah.
Because, it was in Detroit that year, and I was flying back from somewhere. And going on that weekend, it was a pain. And I wasn't even anywhere near Detroit. I was just in the air, along with a bunch of other people headed for the same destination. Because you got to remember too that it's not just the people that go to the game that show up at the Super Bowl site. It's a whole probably 5 times that many that are at the parties, at all the corporate events, and all that. So it would just
the media and it'd
be a huge aggravation. And no thanks. And
all I got to say is Bruno Mars better pack a jacket for that Super Bowl halftime performance. Could you imagine if it's driving snow at halftime?
Oh, boy.
They have to have some sort of contingency plan where he's going to do it inside the arena next door, and they'll broadcast it on the TVs or something. They couldn't do that in the snow.
Snow is really cool at a football game when it's the kind of snow that's falling, but it either melts when it hits the ground or it doesn't accumulate. Then it looks really cool because the field conditions stay pretty much the same. And it's a really neat aesthetic. But other than that, keep it away, because I don't want to. That Philadelphia game was interesting for 5 minutes. Then it was just bad football for a while.
Yeah. It's something interesting. We got a few months to figure out. I don't know which one the NFL wants. I don't know if they want a clear, just cold day, or if they, I think they would probably prefer just a light drizzling of snow for the effect of it.
Right.
Not necessarily a driving snow that affects the game. So, and that's the kind of thing when the NHL held the Winter Classic, they wanted something initially the same kind of idea, outdoors in the snow and the weather. And luckily for them, they got kind of a snow globe effect at the first Winter Classic in Buffalo, where it was a light dusting of snow. So
right.
It was there. It gave you the effect, but it wasn't detrimental to anything really going on.
Yeah,
so maybe that's the best hope for the NFL in this case.
That's the kind of snow you want. You do not want what we saw in Philadelphia yesterday.
Yeah, and I've seen those. My mom lives out in the Midwest. She sent me a picture of the backyard. You guys can have all that stuff.
Thanks.
It was a rough, 50 degrees today. With no clouds, nice and sunny.
23 here.
But hey, there was a little ice on my windshield this morning.
Oh, gee, poor you.
Yeah, and it melted as soon as I turned on the car. But
the nice thing is here that it was sunny out today. We, like I said on Basically a Sports Show, we get very little snow here, but it gets really, really cold.
Yeah, that's sometimes the worst. Where it's cold.
Right.
It doesn't even. It's not even fun. It's just cold. Well, I think that's going to do it. I got nothing else to say. Do you have anything else that you think we missed there, Greg?
Nope. We pretty much covered it.
I don't have anything else to say because I don't. I guess go Colts.
Yeah.
Because Sun Devils don't play for 3 weeks.
Go Packers.
Go Packers.
Try
Buckeyes.
to get Aaron Rodgers back, and hey, Lions, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep losing, Lions.
Exactly.
And who knows? If the Bears win tonight, maybe the whole NFC North is really a cluster. It's just it's almost not that much better than the NFC East at this point.
No,
with the quality of teams.
No, I would say they're about the same, actually.
Yeah. All right. For Greg, I'm Zach. This has been Basically a Football Show. You can catch us on Thursday at Basically a Sports Show. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Please hang up and try again.